Have you ever imagined that during the height of the Cold War, the Soviet Union built trucks so massive and outrageous that even today, they look like something out of a science fiction movie? These were machines capable of crossing frozen swamps, icy deserts, carrying intercontinental missiles, or even rescuing astronauts who landed in the middle of nowhere in Siberia. While the world was focused on tanks and fighter jets, the Soviets were quietly engineering some of the largest and most powerful trucks ever created. So let me ask you this: have you ever even heard of these giants? Or better yet, do you think you know all of them? Today, we're going on a journey back in time, to the era when steel, brute force, and Soviet engineering collided to create machines that seemed to ignore the laws of physics. Trucks so huge and so powerful, most people still can't believe they were real. Ready to discover the 10 biggest Soviet trucks you never knew existed? Stick around till the end, because number 1 on this list is going to blow your mind. Zil E167. In the 1970s, the Soviet Union faced a wild challenge, rescuing cosmonauts who landed in isolated areas with no roads, deep snow, and frozen rivers. That's exactly why the Zil E167 was built, a massive amphibious truck designed for the impossible. Built by Zil, this monster measured over 29 feet long, 8 feet wide, and nearly 10 feet tall. It weighed more than 22,000 pounds empty, and that space was used to carry rescue equipment, medical gear, and even space capsules, all while floating on water. It was powered by a 6.9-liter V8 gasoline engine, producing around 180 horsepower. With four-wheel drive and independent suspension, it could power through swamps, frozen rivers, or deep snow with relative ease. Visually, it looked like a cross between a military truck and an armored boat. The cabin seated 3 crew members, while the rear had space to lay cosmonauts flat after recovery. And thanks to its sealed hull, it could float effortlessly across lakes and rivers. The deep V8 growl combined with the splash of icy water gave it a presence you couldn't ignore. In real missions, this thing traveled over 60 miles off-road just to reach Soyuz capsules that had missed their target landing zone. And here's a fun fact: some missions even included an inflatable raft strapped to the roof, just in case the team had to split up once they reached water. Today, the Zil E167 is a museum piece, but it's remembered as one of the boldest engineering solutions of the Soviet space program. And speaking of massive engineering, the next truck wasn't made to save lives. It was built to carry something powerful enough to end them. 9K714 Oka. If the Zil E167 was impressive, the 9K714 Oka takes colossal truck to a whole new level. Designed in the early 1980s, it wasn't built to rescue. It was built to launch nuclear missiles, real ones, with a range of up to 310 miles. The launch system was mounted on a heavy-duty version of the legendary MAZ-543 chassis. This beast was over 39 feet long, more than 10 feet tall, and weighed nearly 90,000 pounds fully loaded. It was bigger than a city bus, and when the missile launcher extended, the whole setup reached the height of a 2-story building. Under the hood was a 38.8-liter V12 diesel engine delivering over 500 horsepower. With monstrous torque. It had 8-wheel drive and torsion bar suspension to handle the brutal weight and terrain. Mud, snow, desert. Nothing stopped it. Its visual impact was stunning. A compact armored cabin sat up front, while the rear section housed the massive missile launch system, hidden under a retractable roof that opened vertically like a sci-fi weapon platform. Why so big? Simple. Mobility plus stability. The Oka had to move fast, hide quickly, and be ready to fire in minutes, all without the need for a permanent launch site. Here's the kicker. Even though the Oka wasn't officially listed in the INF Disarmament Treaty, the United States demanded its removal. It was that intimidating. Today, very few survive. And those who've seen one in person say it doesn't look like a truck. It looks like a mobile threat on wheels. Think that's extreme? Wait until you see what came next. A truck so big it made roads look too small. Kraz 260. Released in 1979, the Kraz 260 was built for a simple mission: carry heavy military cargo through terrain where most trucks wouldn't survive. But what made it unforgettable was its massive size. So huge, it dwarfed many other military vehicles beside it. Built in Soviet-era Ukraine by Kraz, the truck stretched over 30 feet in length, nearly 9 feet tall, and almost 9 feet wide. Empty, it weighed over 26,000 pounds and could carry more than 22,000 pounds of cargo on top of that. Its V8 diesel engine was 14.8 liters, producing around 240 horsepower with close to 2,000 pounds of torque. It featured 6x6 all-wheel drive and a suspension built with reinforced leaf springs, designed to absorb punishment from rugged, uneven terrain, including mud, snow, or rocky roads. The Kraz 260 looked the part too. Flat panels, massive fenders, steel construction, and tires nearly 5 feet tall. Its deck height was so tall that soldiers often needed steps or support rails to climb into the back. The reason for that height? Flexibility. It was built to carry anything: fuel tanks, rocket launchers, cargo containers, even light tanks. It was a workhorse, plain and simple. It was deployed across the entire Soviet sphere, from Siberia to Afghanistan, and had a reputation for never quitting, even with poor maintenance or in brutal cold. Here's something few people know. In rural Soviet areas, utility poles had to be temporarily removed just to let this truck pass through, due to its height and width. Today, many Kraz 260s are still working in logging, mining, and fuel transport across Eastern Europe, and even parts of Africa and Asia. It's a survivor from a different age. But if you thought that was pure muscle, the next truck didn't just carry weight, it dragged the impossible with a roar that sounded like a beast. MAZ 537. To this day, the MAZ 537 remains a symbol of Soviet brute force. First launched in the late 1950s, it was built for one purpose: pull the heaviest things the Soviet Union had. Missiles, tanks, mobile bridges, and oversized cargo that defied logic. The truck itself was massive, over 30 feet long, 11.5 feet wide, and nearly 10 feet tall. It weighed 47,000 pounds empty, and its frame could handle loads up to 110,000 pounds, no problem. Under the hood, it ran on a 38.8-liter V12 diesel engine pumping out more than 525 horsepower and enough torque to pull a battle tank through deep mud. With 8-wheel drive and torsion bar suspension, it could drive through deserts, swamps, ice, or whatever else got in its way. From a distance, it looked like a mechanical monster. The cab was set far back, the tires were massive, and the deep growl of the engine could be heard long before the truck appeared. Soldiers said they could feel it in their chest before they even saw it. Due to its size, it wasn't easy to maneuver, so it usually operated in open military zones or under convoy escort. It was also used as the base for mobile nuclear missile launchers, making it a crucial part of Cold War strategy. Interestingly, it wasn't only used by the military. The MAZ 537 also played a role in civilian nuclear projects, transporting reactor components weighing over 40 tons to remote power plants where nothing else could reach. And believe it or not, some of these trucks are still running today, both in military storage and repurposed for ultra-heavy transport in remote parts of Russia and Central Asia. But if you think that's impressive, the next truck comes with 2 V8 engines running at the same time. And that's just the beginning. Zil 135. If the MAZ was focused power, the Zil 135 was a wild experiment in engineering. Built by Zil in the late 1950s, this truck wasn't powered by one engine. It had 2 V8 engines, each driving one side of the vehicle. A crazy idea? Absolutely, but it worked. It stretched over 33 feet long, 10 feet wide, and nearly 10 feet tall. It weighed about 44,000 pounds empty, but could carry an additional 22,000 pounds, usually in the form of Frog 7 missiles or similar battlefield systems. Together, the 2 engines delivered over 400 horsepower, and its 8-wheel drive setup allowed it to drive through completely destroyed terrain. Independent suspension on each axle kept it surprisingly stable for such a massive and complex platform. The cab was pushed to the front, with small, narrow windows and shape that looked more like a sci-fi Land Cruiser than a traditional truck. When the missile launcher on the rear was deployed, the whole truck transformed before your eyes. Why was it so big? Because the launch system needed maximum balance and speed. Once a missile was launched, the truck had to move fast. Smaller trucks just couldn't do it safely. During its years of service, the Zil E137 proved incredibly reliable, even with such a complicated mechanical setup. And here's a wild fact. Even with one engine shut down, it could still drive, making it one of the most redundant and overbuilt vehicles of the Cold War. Today, it's a fan favorite among Soviet military collectors, and a few are still preserved in working condition across Russia and Eastern Europe. Loving these Cold War giants? Go ahead and smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications, because we're just getting started, and the biggest machines are still coming. Zil E167. If there were an award for the craziest Soviet truck ever built, the Zil E167 would be a top contender. Developed in the early 1960s, it was a bold attempt to create a vehicle that could cross any terrain, no matter how extreme, especially the frozen wastelands of Siberia. And for that, it had to be huge. It measured over 36 feet long, stood more than 11.5 feet tall, and was about 10.5 feet wide. That's bigger than most modern intercity buses. Yet despite its size, it weighed only around 15,400 pounds empty. Thanks to the use of lightweight materials, it had 6 powered wheels and was driven by 2 V8 gasoline engines, each producing 180 horsepower, for a combined total of 360 horsepower. The dual-engine system was designed for redundancy. Even if one engine failed, the truck could keep moving. But what truly made it stand out were the tires, over 6.5 feet tall, with deep treads built to grip snow, ice, and mud like a snowshoe for giants. Each axle had independent suspension with oversized shocks, helping the truck float over soft terrain. The Zil E167 was tested in the Ural Mountains, driving through snowstorms, bogs, and steep inclines that would challenge modern tractors. Its massive size wasn't just for show, it was practical, and it worked. Here's something few people know. The prototype traveled through regions where no motorized vehicle had ever gone before, blazing trails that were later used for resource exploration in Siberia. Still, due to its high cost and complex design, the truck never entered full-scale production. Only one prototype was built, and it still exists today, preserved at the Zil Museum in Moscow. Those who've seen it in person describe it as a prehistoric steel beast, made to roam where no man or machine had ever dared. And speaking of beasts, the next vehicle doesn't have wheels, it moves on tracks like a tank and looks like a sci-fi snow cruiser built for Arctic survival. Vitas DT10. The Vitas DT10 is one of those vehicles that makes you stop and say, that can't possibly be a truck. And yet, it is. Built in the early 1980s, it was engineered to operate in places where even snow fears to settle. Deep Siberia, the Arctic, and even Antarctica. And of course, its size reflects that mission. This is a 2-part articulated crawler vehicle, measuring over 52 feet long, 11.5 feet tall, and about 10 feet wide. It weighs more than 66,000 pounds empty, but despite that, it floats over deep snow like it's nothing. Instead of wheels, the DT10 rides on massive tank-like tracks, each over 28 inches wide, giving it extremely low ground pressure, allowing it to cruise over soft snow, ice, and swamps. The articulation between its 2 sections gives it incredible maneuverability, even in tight, rugged terrain. Underneath, it packs a turbocharged V12 diesel engine producing over 500 horsepower, with enough torque to haul up to 132,000 pounds of cargo, not including its own weight. The suspension is designed to handle freezing temperatures, heavy-duty torsion bars, and pressurized shock absorbers. Inside, the cab is pressurized and heated, with room for up to 5 crew members. Some variants include sleeping quarters, mobile workshops, and even science labs, because it was designed to be fully self-sufficient in the most remote parts of the world. The DT10 became famous for its use in polar expeditions, but it also saw service in Arctic oil and gas operations, where normal trucks would freeze or sink. Here's something wild. A few civilian models were actually bought by Russian billionaires for private expeditions, fitted with luxurious interiors and extra-large fuel tanks. Think that's big? Wait until you see the next one. A truck so massive it could carry another truck on its back and still have room to spare. MAZ 7310. The MAZ 7310 wasn't built to be practical, pretty, or even comfortable. It had one job: to carry the kind of cargo most trucks wouldn't even dare to try. Introduced in 1976, this 8-wheeled monster served as a platform for ballistic missiles, radar systems, fuel tanks, and anything else too heavy for normal transport. It measured over 36 feet long, 11.5 feet tall, and nearly 10 feet wide. Weighing in at over 44,000 pounds empty, it could carry up to 110,000 pounds, enough to haul another truck on top with room to spare. It used the same 38.8-liter V12 diesel engine as the MAZ 537, putting out more than 500 horsepower and massive torque, enough to pull the equivalent of a 3-story building. With 8-wheel drive and torsion bar suspension, it could roll across marshes, frozen ground, or loose sand like a military freight train. But the size wasn't for show, it was a necessity. This truck often carried nuclear warheads or delicate equipment across long distances, and it had to do so without depending on trains or air transport. Its long, wide frame provided stability, especially when the missile system was mounted and armed. Visually, the MAZ 7310 was a beast. The narrow cab looked like an afterthought compared to the massive body, and when that V12 engine roared, soldiers said they could feel it rumble through their chest before they heard it. Here's something few know. Some MAZ 7310s were adapted to transport parts of space rockets during Soviet space missions. Imagine a truck carrying a piece of a satellite launch system. Yeah, that happened. Today, only a few are still operational. But seeing one in person feels more like standing in front of a rubber-wheeled locomotive than a truck. Still, believe it or not, it's not the biggest on this list. Because the next machine, it looks like a tank factory on wheels. MZKT 7930. The MZKT 7930 represents the bridge between Soviet engineering and modern Russian military technology. Built in the 1990s by the MZKT plant in Belarus, it was designed to replace older models and carry the next generation of heavy weaponry. And for that, it had to be enormous. It measured about 39 feet long, 11.5 feet tall, and just over 10 feet wide, weighing around 46,000 pounds empty. But the real kicker? It could carry an additional 53,000 pounds of payload off-road without breaking a sweat. It was powered by a V12 turbo diesel pushing out around 520 horsepower, with monstrous torque to back it up. The 8-wheel drive system, combined with independent suspension and steering assistance across multiple axles, allowed it to maneuver like something half its size. Shocking, considering its bulk. The cab was advanced for its time, with space for 4 crew members, air filtration for chemical or nuclear environments, and in many versions, full sealing against external threats. But the part that really turns heads? The sheer length of the truck when fully equipped. With a missile launcher like the Iskander loaded, the total system stretched over 65 feet, making it one of the largest wheeled combat vehicles in the world. Here's a fun fact. Because of its massive size, the MZKT 7930 often has to be transported by train just to reach its deployment zone. And even on roads, it usually travels in heavily escorted convoys. Today, it's still actively used by Russian and Allied forces and is considered one of the most reliable mobile launch platforms ever built. It's a rolling fortress, designed to strike hard and disappear fast. And if you think that was big, wait until you meet the king of the list. A truck so large, it can carry other trucks and still have room left over. KZKT 7428. If there's one truck that defines Soviet overkill, it's the KZKT 7428. Built in the 1980s by the KZKT factory in Kurgan, Russia, This monster was designed to tow the heaviest equipment in the Soviet military, including tanks, mobile missile systems, and intercontinental launch platforms. And for that job, it had to be enormous. The 7428 measures over 43 feet long, nearly 13 feet tall, and 10.5 feet wide. It weighs more than 66,000 pounds empty, and it's capable of towing more than 150,000 pounds. That puts it in the same weight class as mining haulers and industrial locomotives. Under the hood, a 40-liter turbocharged V12 diesel engine. Yes, 40 liters, producing around 1,000 horsepower, with an estimated 10,000 pounds-feet of torque. This thing could literally pull a small ship if you slapped wheels on it. It used an 8x8 drivetrain, reinforced suspension, and an automated transmission system, designed to handle steep climbs, muddy slopes, snow-covered roads, and desert terrain. The tires? Over 5 feet tall, each, big enough for a grown adult to stand behind and disappear completely. But why so massive? Because it had to move nuclear equipment across hundreds of miles without shaking it to pieces. The massive frame gave it incredible stability, and the sheer weight added to the precision of the transport. Visually, it's intimidating. The narrow, armored cab has tiny windows, and the overall shape looks more like a mobile bunker than a truck. When the engine starts, it sounds like a jet turbine, and the ground literally shakes under its weight. Here's something not many people know. The KZ 7428 was also used in extreme civilian operations, like hauling nuclear reactor components or disabled trains out of inaccessible zones. Today, it's extremely rare to see one outside of military storage or museums. But the ones that remain are preserved like relics, a reminder of when engineering was driven by raw power, not limitations. And with that, we wrap up our journey through some of the most outrageous machines the Cold War ever produced. Throughout this video, we traveled through a gallery of titans, machines created to challenge logic, conquer terrain, and face the impossible. From amphibious vehicles rescuing astronauts in the Siberian ice to colossuses carrying nuclear missiles larger than buses, each truck on this list carries more than weight. It carries history, strategy, and mechanical genius. These trucks weren't built just to drive. They were made to open paths where there were no roads, to cross snow, swamps, deserts, and to do it while hauling tons of cargo. They are symbols of an era when engineering didn't accept limits, and where size wasn't just excess, it was essential. Now tell me in the comments, which of these giant machines did you find the most insane? Which one would you love to see up close, or even drive? And if you had to pick one to take on an extreme mission, which one would it be? And of course, if you enjoy this kind of content, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell, because every week there's a new video showcasing the most incredible machines that dominate ice, snow, mud, and the world's most extreme conditions. See you in the next video.